The future of STV's news service in Aberdeen feels like it's hanging by a thread. Plans are in motion to shut down the dedicated North of Scotland bulletin and pull everything into a single national programme from Glasgow. If that happens, it won't just close a studio, it will close a chapter of the region's history. And for me, that strikes deeper than any corporate announcement ever admits. Regional news in the North of Scotland has always carried a certain pride. You can trace it right back to 1961, when Grampian Television switched on for the first time. The channel gave the region something rare, a sense that the world north of Dundee actually mattered to the people telling the news. Fishing towns, farms, oil rigs, island communities. Suddenly these places had a seat at the table, and once people see themselves on screen, they don't forget the feeling. As the years rolled on, the news from Aberdeen built its own character. It wasn't glossy or perfect. It didn't pretend to be, but it was rooted. It reflected the way people spoke, the way they worked, the way they lived. Stories didn't come from boardrooms. They came from harbours, crofts, school halls and windswept laybys where reporters held onto their microphones for dear life. Even after Grampian became STV in 2006, that pulse survived. The Aberdeen Bulletin kept the North in focus. It didn't always get everything right, but it understood the region better than any national service ever could, because it breathed the same air as the people it served. That's why this proposed closure unsettles me. Not because I fear change. Change will come whether we want it or not, but because it feels like a slow unravelling of something unique. Once a region loses its dedicated news voice, it rarely comes back, and there's no neat way to stitch it up again. STV says the cuts are about money, and I don't doubt the numbers. Advertising is down, linear audiences are shrinking. The media world has shrunk to the point where even big names feel like they're held together with tape and coffee fumes. But truth sits alongside numbers, and the truth is that when regional news is centralised, something precious slips away. It doesn't vanish in one big dramatic moment, it fades bit by bit. What worries me most is the shift from being a hub to being an outpost. If production and presentation move to Glasgow, Aberdeen stops steering its own ship. It becomes a supplier of stories instead of a storyteller. And that changes everything. It changes how decisions are made, how stories are shaped, and what ends up on screen. And here's where my personal view kicks in. I don't believe any newsroom in the central belt, no matter how well-meaning, can ever fully capture the spirit of North Scotland. They can report it, yes, they can cover it, they can send people up for a day or two, but they can't feel it in their bones. Local news works best when the people making it live among the people watching it, when your children go to the same schools, when you shop at the same supermarkets, when you swear at the same potholes, when you feel the region instead of just covering it. That connection is what Aberdeen's Bulletin has always held on to, and I fear that this move will loosen that grip. I've also been thinking a lot about identity. When you turn on the telly and see your own region front and centre, you feel rooted, you feel visible. When these stories get pushed into a national bulletin, they don't disappear, but they shrink. They lose texture, they lose priority, they lose the weight they once carried. And that matters because people shape their understanding of themselves, in part, through the stories told about where they live. And I can't shake the feeling that if Aberdeen loses its dedicated news service, the region itself becomes a little less defined in the national picture, a little bit softer around the edges and a bit easier to overlook. And here's another personal view. Centralisation always promises efficiency. It rarely promises identity, and in the long run, identity is what makes regional news worth having. Without it, you might as well watch a national programme with an occasional Northern Scotland update squeezed in between two stories about Edinburgh. And it also bothers me that once these cuts happen, they rarely reverse. When you close a studio, sell equipment, shift staff, reshape workflows, you don't simply bring it back later. These decisions carve themselves into the structure. And that's why this moment feels bigger than one bulletin. It feels like a fork in the road for the region. But it's not all bleak. Northern Scotland has always had a habit of refusing to disappear quietly. If the bulletin closes, I can see the region leaning harder into digital news, short videos, local streaming, long-form storytelling online. People want stories about their own world, and they'll look for them wherever they can find them. Maybe the future of news in northern Scotland won't sit in a half-hour television bulletin anymore. Maybe it will sit in an on-demand, online-first reporting way that runs on its own schedule and speaks with its own voice. There's potential there. But that still doesn't replace the shared moment of sitting down at the end of the day, flicking on the TV and hearing someone say, "Here's what's happening in your part of Scotland." And that's what Aberdeen risks losing. Not just the staff, not just the studio, but the daily ritual that says, this region matters. I know people in Scotland will fight to stay visible, the region always has, and broadcasters do listen when communities push back. Public pressure can shape outcomes. It has happened before. So as STV prepares for this change, I keep circling the same thought. Regional news isn't just news, it's a relationship, and this region deserves a relationship that isn't long distance. If Aberdeen loses its bulletin, something irreplaceable goes with it. Not gone overnight, but gone over time. And the region deserves better than that. Whatever comes next, one thing won't change. The stories of Northern Scotland will still matter. The challenge will be making sure they're still heard. And that's why all this feels so important. Because if we stop hearing Northern Scotland on our screens, the danger's simple. We stop seeing it too. You've been listening to the TV Live podcast. I'm Rob Francis.